Most suicidal people don't want to die. They want the pain to stop. And when the pain gets high enough, the brain narrows down the options to one thing: exit. But one person, one genuine message can interrupt the spiral. This is the power of one, the power of the Kyle principle. Let me say this carefully. Suicidal ideation isn't always, I want to die. It's often, I can't keep living like this. And this is a very important distinction here, because it's a revelation of the inner workings of that individual. And when someone is in that state, their mind starts doing something dangerous. It narrows. It tunnels. It can't see choices that it normally would. That's why the most powerful thing you can do isn't a perfect speech. It's presence. It's genuine care. Sometimes one person is the difference between someone feeling alone and someone holding on. Hey guys, my name is Thomas Emmanuel Orms O'Brien. I am the president and co-founder of Building a Home Inc. I'm also a suicide survivor, a former drug addict and alcoholic, a rehabilitated habitual liar, and for the last 20 years, I've been studying religion from all over the world. And most recently, I'm in the pursuit of a degree of psychology. Right now, I'm what is known as an autodidact, which basically means I have been studying the ins and outs of all of these subjects for a very long time. Now, what that means for you is the reason why we explain who I am and we are, my wife is a member of the company as well, is we understand that our verbiage is very unique to us, and we want people to understand where we're coming from as we explain these concepts. The main reason why this company started was after I attempted suicide and survived, I immediately was made aware of three things. Number one, if I was still alive, I was loved. The concept of God was on my mind as I made my suicide attempt, wondering if he was real, if he existed. If he did, in which form did he take? Because there is a definition of God for many different religions all over the world. So for us, our theistic view as a company is we do believe in God as the universal force of love expressed perfectly through the person of Jesus. Now we want to make ourselves very clear. We are not religious at all. In fact, we abhor religion because religion defined is this: man defining God for you versus God defining himself to you. And when you realize the latter is so much more powerful in its impact, revelation, and long-standing firmness that can be obtained in your life. That is what real faith is, something that is experiential, something that goes beyond words that no one can take from you because it's become intimate and deeply personal. And so from that viewpoint, we identify the 7 areas a human being lacks when they are attempting suicide. Myself, specifically, I realized these are the things I didn't have that led me to that very place. But most importantly, we believe that everything must be backed by what is in reality. And we will define that in a moment. But the 7 things that any human being requires, we call building a house. It's a framework for wholeness, because truly every human being on earth should have and is designed to have a whole and fulfilled life. Not a perfect one, but fulfilled. And there's only very specific things that you can do in terms of learning and intentional building to obtain that kind of life. And so we've observed everything in psychology, neuroscience, and religion to be able to pinpoint those exact things. And so, just like in any architecture, what you must do to build a whole life is start from the ground up. If the foundational principles in your life aren't aligned with the truth of reality in the universe, then you cannot possibly succeed. And the life you live will be one that is both subpar and filled with suffering that has no redemption. Now, that does not mean that a person who is in pursuit of obtaining wholeness is without suffering. That's not true. The universal experience for being born as a human being in this universe is pain. But the only redemption of that pain, what would give life true purpose, is if healing and restoration was possible. The greatest story narrative that has been given to human beings from the greatest authors in our history, starting tens of thousands of years ago, even in the hieroglyphics, even in the pictographic images that we discover in caves about ancient humanity. The hero's story. Comeback is the greatest medicine on earth. The cycle of life, where there was once death, there is life. And that life then leads to a death which breeds more life. And so, we believe that you must start with the foundation, and that's love and truth. Why are these synonymous? Because love without truth is just tolerance, and that's a very poor standard of living. But truth without love is brutality. People who claim to only speak truth and do not do it in love have no lasting impact on humanity. Why? Because of the design of the human soul, the way the brain and the mind works. As most of you know, positive reinforcement is the truest and greatest way outside of suffering for a human being to learn something. And so that is why love, paired with the truth, is most impactful. We're talking about being most impactful and most efficient. Obviously, there are variations and unique exceptions to all of these things. But if we stick to the core principles, then we are truly able to ascertain how to navigate these things. And we define it simply. Love is God. He himself is the universal force of love. How he operates, who he truly is, his true character. And of course, like I said, perfectly represented in the person of Jesus. And if you're an atheistic individual or the word Jesus does not sit well with you, I truly understand. I myself have been there. But the more and more you search for the perfect axiomatic individual, the person that you would want to receive ultimate inspiration from, and you observe his life and what we have documented about his life, because outside of religious Semitic Abrahamic text, there is real anthropologic and archaeological evidence for a man known as Jesus. So the only question after that remains is he who the Bible claims he is? Or is he who whoever else claims to know about Jesus he is? In fact, he is spoken about in almost every other world religion. With that being said, we define truth as this. Number one, must be observable and measurable in the universe through science. The book of nature is what grounds us to reality. In fact, it is through that reality that we can discern and understand what people would call the spiritual realm. Because what is seen is created by what is unseen. And so, by studying science, you have the clearest and most beautiful pathway to an experiential, intimate, and personal relationship with God. And the other part of truth is my truth. But the difference is, we don't say my truth as my opinion. What my truth really means, unlike some people in my generation say, is what is true about you. Your pain, your fear, your hopes, your dreams, all coming down to the most important question. What's your favorite color? Right? But that is what my truth is. What is true about you? Who you are, what you've been through, how you are, why you are, and what you are. Because fundamentally, we believe that every human being, subconsciously or consciously, if you're more self-aware, is asking these two questions. Who am I? And why am I here? And in the pursuit of those two questions would be the most adventurous and fulfilling life with lasting impact any human being could ever live. After that, we have what is known as the basement, which is identity and integrity. Because if you believe yourself to be a created individual, which, let me remind you, your fingerprint is completely unique to you. There is no other human being on earth like it. So the greatest superpower that you could possibly have is to be fully and truthfully you. Who you are and why you're here. And most people can't answer that question. They have ideas, concepts about who they really are, but do you know? Very important question. And integrity paired with identity is this, because the driving force and the most important thing for every human psyche is to live honestly. And so once you are in the discovery of who you are, or you have obtained your identity, your job then would be to live that out to the utmost of your capacity every single day. That's what would make you integral, integritous, someone who is themselves 100%. The restoration of your original design. After that, with foundation being love and truth, identity and integrity being who you are and living out who you are to your utmost, it would lead you to the most next logical conclusion, which is stewardship of your life. And really, that comes down to two things on a base level. Number one, your physical health, and number two, your financial health. Because if your physical health is in lack, you may have 1,000 dreams, but you only have one focus: to take care of yourself. But if you're healthy, you have the capacity to continue imagining, to continue dreaming, to pursue every single thing with reckless abandon. And of course, financial health. Make no mistake, we live in the modern world. Net worth is necessary to have lasting impact on this planet. That does not mean money is the most important thing. It certainly is not. But it is 100% a means to an end. So you must be financially healthy if you're going to live a whole life. And we define financial health at BHI simply in these three things. Number one, get on a budget. Because as John Maxwell says, $50 million a year, legendary author and prolific voice in leadership, both in business, personal development, relationship with God, the whole nine. He says, if you're not leading your money is leading you. So getting on a budget is one of the first steps to becoming wealthy. Understanding where your money goes, why it goes, how it goes, who it goes with, and what it's for. If you do not have a budget, your finances are in chaos. And because money is math, you must apply order for it to multiply. Number two, get out of debt. Because true freedom is when you are bound to no man. You owe no man anything but to love them. That's free. You're tied down to nothing. Number three, invest for the future. Because if you are loved and you're living in truth in who you are, then you want to build. The natural inclination for every single human being is to build something that lasts. Even if you don't know exactly what that is, which we can help you do that, you must think for the future. Otherwise, you don't have one. And so, one of the greatest things that is a measurement of success is a person's capacity to plan forward. And so, that would be financial health. That would be wholeness. Your current financial situation is under control by being in a budget. You owe your finances to no man, and you're constantly building your capacity to have greater finances in the future. That leaves nothing missing, nothing broken. True wholeness. Now after that we come to the second floor, which is vocations. The Latin root word is vocare, which means to call. Basically, what everyone likes to say on the internet today, your purpose in life. Now, it doesn't have to be one big grand thing. I believe you can have multiple expressions of this. That's why we say vocations. Long story short, what you do in service to others. Because make no mistake, your calling will always lead to the service of other people. You serve, and you are served. The greatest way to have value in the marketplace is to provide value. You can be paid for what you provide. That's universal experience. Obviously, some countries do not operate in that economic system like we do here in the United States, but most in the West operate in that way. You bring value, you are given compensation for that value. And everyone has the capacity to bring value to the marketplace. So that's your economic expression. Number two, what you do for God for free. This is between you and Him. No one has to see it. No one has to know about it. It is that silent work behind the scenes. And then lastly, what you do for others for free. Because being philanthropic is not just a high-minded, affluent, philosophical idea. It is one of the greatest ways to bring true joy and fulfillment to your soul. Assist another human being. That is what truly can propel you forward. And the way you discover your vocations is in 4 different categories. Number 1, and most importantly, you bring who you are into what you do. As opposed to a lot of modern society, they gain who they are from what they do. The problem with gaining your identity from your work is when that work is no longer possible to perform, you die. It dies, you die. And so it puts you in a suboptimal position for neurological development and psychological health. So you bring who you are into what you do. That's why there are several variations of human beings with the exact same job title. For example, some teachers in school you liked, some you didn't like. They were all teachers. Some doctors are the most caring doctors you have ever met. Some are not. They're still all doctors. And so people don't even realize that they bring who they are into what they do when they place their identity in the work itself. Incorrect. So that's number one. Number two, your calling in life is tied to the worst thing or things that have ever happened to you. As I stated earlier, the only way that this life could be worth living is if the pain and suffering can be redeemed. Otherwise, it's an endless cycle of death with no life. That is a modern atheistic biological evolutionary view, but we do not subscribe to that. There are parts of the theory of evolution that are scientifically coherent, but the perspective one must have is that endless pain and suffering must be redeemed for life to be worth living. And so, your greatest pain is the route to someone else's ultimate healing. What you have survived, you can now bring the wisdom, the clarity, and the application to a person who is currently going through that very same thing, or even something familiar. Because human beings are meant to co-regulate. We are mammalian in our nature, but what's more important than that is how our mammalian traits are expressed. Dr. Daniel Siegel, one of the most prolific minds of our time, developed what is known as the polyvagal theory, tied to your vagus nerve, proving that human interaction is tied directly to our neurological functions and our physiological functions through the nervous system. An isolated human being is a suffering human being. Number three, your childhood dreams. Who you were before you were affected by trauma and pain. Those things that lit you up, your bright and ever-expansive imagination, that call to adventure that you felt when you were a child, when you were just in awe of everything around you, absorbing everything with this voracious desire for growth. And then number four, as I said, in service to others, because your calling, your purpose will always lead you to impacting humanity. It varies by scale for everyone, but that is your calling. Self, family, community, world. Those are the circles of expansion. Which brings us to the attic of the house, which is plainly joy, or as we define it, hobbies. And hobbies are this: the things you love doing with the people that you love doing them with. Dr. Stuart Brown, one of the most brilliant psychologists ever, wrote a book called Play. In it, he says this: the opposite of play is not work, it's depression. So joy is a neurological requirement for health of the human being. If you are not intentionally and actively engaging in joy, your life is not whole. Your life is not full. something is missing, something is broken. Now, that's not to say we are Hellenistic, that all we do is enjoy life. There are very much important times to be absolute work focused, to be the most dynamic force of will. Because to build business or to be skillful in one's career takes a tremendous amount of skill, discipline, force, and determination. But that does not also mean you cannot be joyous. It just must be intentional. A set time taken out to remember what's truly important in life. The longest happiness study still being conducted to this day is at Harvard. It started in the 1930s. And so from 1938, I believe, to present, we're looking at 83 years of human observed science. The most important thing to happiness for any human being is relationships. So that is why we define hobbies as the things you love doing with the people you love doing them with. After that, on the side of the house, we have the chimney, which is release. You let that smoke out of your house. Simply defined as this: release of people and things that do not serve your purpose. That relationship you've held on for too long. Those less than ideal partners that you keep engaging in romance with. Those habits that are destroying your production, your capability, your health, your mentality. Release them all. Because if the house gets filled with smoke, not only do you suffocate and die, but all those in it with you as well. And the last, the skylight, which is the window at the top of the house that illuminates every single room, which is the divine connection and or wisdom. Because intelligence is information or knowledge, but wisdom is the application of that knowledge. For example, most people can classify a tomato as a fruit, but wisdom is not putting a tomato in a fruit salad. And so understanding that everything that happened in your life happened for you and not to you. And so every video that we talk about, we weave in the wholeness framework, and that is our mindset when we have these moments with you guys. Now, I'm still on my own journey of mastery. I believe it is something that is lifelong, but I'm certainly farther ahead now than I've ever been. And so I hope these insights have been helpful to you, but we're going to get back into today's video. The power of one, as Lee likes to call it, the Kyle principle. So the first concept in psychology that I want to talk with you guys about is something known as cognitive constriction. In layman's terms, tunnel vision. And what it means is when pain and stress get extreme, the mind loses flexibility. Basically, it can't see options. So what it looks like in real life, especially someone who comes from a traumatized childhood, very important to know. The most important time period in any one human being's life for neurological brain development is in utero to 12 years old. Now, secondarily after that, after 12 up until 18, also very important. But those first 12 years, if you do not experience love, consistency, safety, and predictability, you cannot develop what's known as secure attachment. If you develop any other attachment type besides secure attachment, you will start to make choices and decisions for survival, not living. Very big distinction. Because if you live in survival for too long, you live in despair. And a human being can only be in despair before they no longer want to live. And so, prime time is from in utero to 12 years old. Now, this varies by every human experience, but what it looks like in real life, if you're experiencing cognitive constriction, is this. You say things like, nothing will ever change. It's nonsense. Things are changing all the time. The laws of science dictate to us that nothing stays the same. There are repeated patterns in life, but for the most part, everything changes. Number 2, there's no way out. When you cannot see beyond your current circumstance, your current pain, your current suffering, you do not have hope, which hope is one of the most important concepts for every single human being. It's what the Bible describes as faith. It says faith is the substance of things hoped for, the evidence of things not seen. So even if you're not a Bible-believing person, you are a faith-based individual, because we all have hopes, we all have dreams. I hope I wake up tomorrow. I may not. I hope for the next 5 years, my wife and I become more financially free. We grow the business. We invest in assets. We start to live a life that is affluent. We raise our children. It's not a guarantee, right? The next thing you say is this is the only answer. And I myself can personally tell you this. After I attempted suicide and survived, I realized I wasn't afraid to die. What I was afraid of was continuing to live while internally dying. If all my life every day was just going to be death, I might as well embrace death. But it is truly what can give someone life if you have that perspective shift. I wanted guarantee, but that's the thing about life. There is no guarantee. The moment you were born, there was risk. In fact, life is so risky, you won't get out alive. And so you can risk going for safety, or you can risk going on the adventure in the pursuit of wholeness. Another thing that people say, you can't imagine next month, only right now. So that's that cognitive constriction, that tunnel vision. In immense suffering, your options narrow, not expand. And why does that matter? Because someone can have 10 real options to them. But in that state, their brain can only see one. And that's not even just suicidal ideation. That's any problem or confrontation that human beings can have. In fact, a business owner. That's why the greatest CEOs and entrepreneurs in the world hire strategists, people who help them see outside of their scope, to get above the problem, to get below the problem, to get aside the problem, to bust through that wall of the problem, to build a door into the wall and open it, to crawl through the window of that problem. Because being constricted is also what keeps you unsuccessful. Expansion is what allows success. But expansion must first happen here. And so, but more specifically with us, Suicidal ideation is often tunnel vision, not truth. And so it becomes harder and harder for a person to deal with the truth, not because they don't want it, because they're psychologically going through something that is measurable in science. Concept number 2, hopelessness. Hope isn't optimism. There's a distinction. Hope is a belief that there is a path forward. What we described as faith, right? So hopelessness is when the future feels sealed shut. What it looks like is, I'll always be this way. I can't change. Which is not true. You change your clothes every day. That's a change. People change their hairstyle. They change jobs. They change locations. So if your external factors can change consistently, the internal factors can as well. No one can help. Of course, when you've experienced loss at the hand of other human beings, especially the ones who were meant to help and love you, this can be a very hard one to overcome. But that's why we teach the power of one, the Kyle principle, because when someone does reach out and help, it can change the world. And that is the fundamental state, I believe, of every human being. Not nihilistic, not filled with death, destruction, rage, despair, hopelessness, but a person who wants to live, who wants to love, who wants to be whole. Lastly, I've tried everything. How many times have you said that to yourself? I've tried it all. But then when you ask them, you say, okay, well, tell me, what have you tried? And spell it out. And they go, oh, I've tried 1,000 things. And you say, okay, what are the 1,000? And then they say, oh, well, actually, I've only tried these 3 things over and over again, and they keep not working. Right? And so just because what you believe to be true does not actually mean it's true. That's why my truth has to be grounded in what's observable and measurable in the universe. Because remember, the design of the brain is survival, which is why we develop things called maladaptive coping mechanisms. Those are the things that helped you survive when you were a child, when you weren't meant to be an adult, but out of necessity, you had to be. But those same things that protected you then, in your childhood, are the source of the destruction of your adult life. And so, you must go back to the source. If you manage symptoms, you will never be well. If you get to the root, you can be well. And why does that matter? Because if the brain can't access a future, it starts chasing immediate relief, which is why we avert to alcoholism, drug abuse, suicide, anything that can grant us immediate relief, because we do not have the capacity to observe a relief in the future. So when the future disappears, the present becomes unbearable. And there is so many peer-reviewed journals on this concept for almost 250 years since the start of modern psychology, which psychology is just the modern scientific pursuit of these truths. These truths have been observable in human history since the beginning of humanity. But now we have terminology and literature that help us understand these things on another level, but they've always been true. Number 3, there's something called perceived burdensomeness and thwarted belonging. And I don't have to name the academic terms every time, but perceived burdensomeness basically is the I'm a problem lie. And what that means in plain English is you don't think you're loved, and you think I'm a burden. And what does that look like? Everyone would be better off without me. One of the biggest lies. Number 2, I ruin everything. See, an I statement is an identity statement. I am X. I do X. I will X. I. Or, number 3, I'm too much. Then, thwarted belonging is the I don't matter lie. But if your foundation is love and truth, you would know everyone matters. Everyone. And so what does that mean? They don't feel connected. They feel invisible. And what does that look like? Withdrawal, going quiet, not replying to messages, not answering phone calls, isolating even around people. I remember for many years of my life, I was always able to say this quote. I forget who was the originator of it, but it was this: I could stand in a room of 1,000 people and still feel completely alone. And I lived that way for a very long time. And so I became whoever you needed me to be, so I could feel that connection, that worth. Why does that matter? Because isolation doesn't just hurt emotionally. It amplifies risk because it deepens the lie, no one sees me. One of the greatest psychologists of our time, named Dr. John Deloney, he's a member of the Ramsey Solutions team. He says this: grief needs a witness. Something about truly being seen. Not for your information, not for your problems, just as an individual. That intrinsic value that one human being can give to another. So powerful. And the thing is, it's in the science. These are not abstract, philosophical, feel-good ideas. These things are proven time and time again, and yet we take them for granted. So what happens is that not only human destruction, but of course, suicide grows best in secrecy and isolation. Now I want to bring you to the concepts in neuroscience outside of the psychology. We go from the mind to the brain. And so there's this thing called the threat system or survival mode. It runs in the amygdala, the mammalian part of your brain. This is what is wired and designed to help you survive. Thank God for it. Very useful tool. Obviously, very useful to us because as a race, we've survived for a very long time. We destroy ourselves as well, but we've survived for a very long time. And so basically, your brain has a smoke alarm. When it thinks you're in danger, it pulls power away from thinking, right? It wants you to think less and puts it into surviving. And so your prefrontal cortex, this is where thought, imagination, reasoning, planning, all of these things are up here. It reduces the bandwidth and brings you back here in your amygdala part of your brain. Why? Because the design of the human being hasn't changed. Society and circumstance have changed over the millennia, but your same brain that kept you alive in the jungle 10,000 years ago while you were hunting for prey, and then out of the underbrush you see a saber-toothed tiger or a smilodon stalking you now, You don't want to think anymore. You don't want to imagine. You don't want to dream. You don't want to reason. You just want maximum optimal survivability in the blink of an eye. So you get dumped with what is called the stress hormones, cortisol and adrenaline. Those are the two things that your brain sends to your entire body to help you survive, whether it be run faster, whether it be lift stronger, whether it be more bold, more courageous, whatever it is you need to do to either evade or destroy the threat, right? Fight, flight, or freeze. Those are the three options. And so what that looks like often is panic, insomnia. You don't sleep well when your stress hormones are elevated in the body. Dr. Amby Huberman, one of the most prolific neuroscientists of our age, has his own channels, by the way. I would encourage you to go take a look there. He's still on staff at Stanford while he's also building his own personal brand. Brilliant guy. He has made it very easy to understand neurological concepts in plain English, and I would encourage you to go give him a watch and deep dive on what happens with the cortisol in the body. But very important, agitation. Yeah, you're constantly on edge, or you become numb. Your brain attempts to remove all feeling whatsoever because any one feeling can be too intense, which if that intensity were to continue for long periods of time, your mind breaks, you end up in a straitjacket in an insane asylum. The people who are in insane asylums are just people who are so traumatized that they became broken, that their brain tried to assist them in for surviving so long that their mind no longer had the capacity to thrive, which is truly sad. I'm glad I didn't end up in that place. Or you get racing thoughts. It's cycling to try to get the most clearest solution possible, and you're going through 100 different iterations of that one thing, and you're replaying conversations and how you could have done it and what you could have done and shoulda, coulda, woulda. Hindsight, always they say, right? 2020. Well, that's a survival adaptive mechanism. Or blankness. You either think too much or you think too little. And why that matters. In survival mode, logic becomes harder to access. That's why arguing someone out of suicidal ideation fails. There's nothing you can prove to a person who has reached the edge of their despair. This is where love comes in. Because the truth is, hey, don't commit suicide. But that's logical. The truth is logical. And they're back here. And so love is the only thing that can bring a person from the amygdala to the prefrontal cortex. That's why if pain is the most universal experience of every human being, what heals pain? Love heals pain. That's well documented. And so if love heals the most real aspect of being human, which is pain, then love is the ultimate force in the universe. There is nothing stronger than love. True love. Unconditional. Which is why love never fails. Ever. It's only a matter of time. And so when the body thinks it's dying, it doesn't care about your motivational quote. It requires proximity. It requires genuine nervous, systematical, physiological care and presence. something that can be felt, not just heard. The next neurological concept is the prefrontal cortex offline. I just spoke about it a little bit, but it's the front part of your brain, like I said, that helps you plan, weigh options, imagine consequences. Under extreme stress, it goes offline. Not permanently, but temporarily. And what does that look like? Impulsive thoughts. Black and white decisions, no silver lining. It's either this or this, right? I just need this to stop. And why it matters. Your job is to help them get back into a calmer state where options come back online. So you don't reason someone out of a fire alarm. You help them get safe first. If the building's on fire, you get out the building. Right? But there's a beautiful healing mechanism in all of this. And I spoke about it a little bit. And it's co-regulation. Humans regulate their nervous systems together. A calm, caring person can help bring someone out of threat mode. And what does it look like? A steady voice. Someone staying present. Being seen without judgment. Consistent follow-up. Why does that matter? Because this can reduce the threat response enough to the mind so that it can widen again. So love isn't a vibe. It's a biological signal of safety. So I want to talk about what love did for me. You're going to see a few screenshots on the screen right now. This was a little bit after. I don't have the data from back then, but pretty much it stayed the same. All of my Facebook friends, all of my followers on X, all of my Instagram followers, and all of the contacts that I had in my phone. And it totaled to 1,227 connections, as we would call it in this modern age of social media. But when I was going through what I was going through, it was post-divorce, and I had lost a leadership position in a community that I was involved with since I was 10 years old. And I was under extreme scrutiny by a lot of people. And a lot of people told me that I should die. They told me that I was worthless. They told me that I would end up as nothing because I had made a mistake of marrying the wrong person. And when you marry the wrong person, you become the wrong person. So let me just show you what this looks like in real life. I have my notes here because I didn't want to forget anything. So in 2022, before I attempted suicide, I ended up shutting down for about 3 weeks. In those 3 weeks, I didn't go out. I didn't personally reach out to anyone. I was on my last legs. This was after my divorce. I kind of explained it a little bit earlier. But yeah, my life blew up in my face, basically. And caused me to question everything. You know, who I am, why am I here? You know, does God exist? If he doesn't, what does that reality look like? If he does, what does that reality look like? It was, I don't want to say bottom, because that's hard to quantify. But I guess for all intents and purposes of the metaphor, I guess I'll just say rock bottom, because that's a commonly understood analogy. But I just saw no way out. I saw no escape of my pain. I was deeply ashamed. Um, I was carrying a lot of guilt. I felt unworthy, and like I explained earlier, I believe to be the problem because of the impact of the negativity in which, when you go through a divorce, you've blent your life with this person, and your friends become their friends become your friends. You connect and bring your families together. And so when that rupture happens, it's truly like a death. And even if the relationship wasn't great, it was 5 years. 5 years of life that had gone by. 5 years of trying to work on something that inevitably was going to die. So also I think of, not anymore, but in this time period, I think of the time wasted, like we waste our time on doing anything, really. No time is wasted. All time is just utilized either poorly or positively. But there is no waste, because if you use your time poorly, it will lead to poor outcomes, which can be a great teacher if you're able to survive the other side of them. Obviously, if you use your time wisely, positively, it leads to great success. So that's where I'm at now. But where I was at then, I definitely felt like, I had given away half of a decade, a lot of my 20s to this person. And the life that she and I had built was not great at all, because it was built on, lies, resentment, a false sense of self for the both of us. And honestly, it was a gift. It ended up being a gift, because the divorce saved me from her and her from me. And that's the problem when you enter into a relationship that was never meant to happen. It doesn't go well for either of the parties. And obviously, when you're in the midst of pain, you can skew the results and tip the scales in one favor or the other. But at the end of the day, the best thing for both of us was that divorce. But yet it was really hard, because I had an idea of the type of man that I wanted to be, because my parents got divorced when I was 8, and I swore it would never happen to me. That's the problem, is that when you try so hard to not be that version of your parents that you never wanted to be, oftentimes you emulate that person, because your focus becomes your reality. And so if you only focus on not being that negative person, then you have no personal growth. You have no dynamic spark in the upward aiming direction, because even though an avoidance of negativity is a justified position for a person who comes from a traumatic childhood, it doesn't work that way. Avoiding injustice versus aiming and running towards justice are two very different things. And so, yeah, I was really beat down. And when you go through tragedy, you find out real quick who your friends are. I found out that I didn't have any that were local to me. I had maybe 5 or 6 members of my community that were kind, caring, sympathetic. But because I was in a leadership position, Most people either were happy that I fell, which unfortunately, when you're a leader, there are people that just pray for your downfall, and those are the people that are envious of what you're doing, envious of your success. And I was very naive back then. I thought, I'll just try my best, and that would be good enough for everybody. But it's not. That's not the reality. When you try your best, you discover really, really quickly the types of people that are around you. There are those that are support you and are actually genuinely appreciative that you're alive as a human being on this planet and wish you the best. And there are those who are indifferent. They could care less whether you succeed or you fail. You're just another number in a crowd of 7 billion. And there are those who, do not want you to be successful because your success exposes a part of themselves in which they are avoiding. Your success threatens their comfort. And unfortunately, those are the three archetypes of the type of people that will be around you. And unfortunately, there are more people that could care less and wish your success to be diminished oftentimes than those who genuinely care for you. Now, that's not to say there aren't massive communities of people that wish for the success of every human being. I would be lying if that was not true. But when you're in religious circles, when you're in bodies of, believers in God, that environment fails miserably. And honestly, it's one of the things that turned me off to religion in a whole was my own experience. And obviously everyone hasn't experienced the same thing that I have, but I learned very quickly the difference between religion and a relationship with God. Unfortunately, that learning took the moment of revelation was quick, but it's something that took a very, very long time. And that's not the video for today. That's probably a video for some other time. And for people who are theistic and for people who do believe in God, we need to do an analysis on how we behave ourselves, surely. But anyway, so these, what I want you to see is what quiet looks like in a world full of people. We live in this age of connection, and it's about how many followers you have, how many people like your posts, how many numbers you have in your phone, whether someone has a green bubble when they text you or a blue bubble when they text you. All this shit that doesn't even matter. Because when you have 10,000 followers aggregate between all of your social media accounts, and in an emergency you can never contact any one of those people when you actually need another human being by your side, not someone who can just double tap the screen and like your latest six-pack photo in the gym, or when you rent a yacht in the middle of the ocean and you pay a bunch of extras, or you have people around you that just couldn't give a damn about your well-being. They just give a damn about your affluence. It's really sad, and it causes tragedy. My story is not a unique story. It's probably pretty common. As far as the studies go, as far as the data that's available, people feeling more and more isolated and alone, despite the fact that there are more and more apps to be social on. Because that's the one thing, no matter how far the AI age goes, and I'm a proponent of AI. I love AI. I love science. I love technological advancement. I love discovery. I love the journey of creation. But one need that will forever remain, because it is designed within the psyche, the brain, the heart, mind, and soul of every single human being is connection. And it's inescapable. And so what quiet looks like in a world full of people. One screenshot you saw were all of my Facebook friends. I'll put it here again. These were my ex followers. These are my Instagram followers. And this is the number of contacts that I had in my phone. The numbers look a little different back then, like I said. But across the board, that's 1,227 people. Out of 1,227 people, when I stopped texting or calling, that 3-week period, I completely disconnected from the world entirely. There was a man named Kyle. He was the only one that cared enough to check on me. He sent me a video, and I'm going to play it for you guys. The video that he sent me is dated on September 21st of 2022. My suicide attempt was the next day, September 22nd, 2022. So one day before. One day. Now, you might be saying, well, it didn't work. He sent you that video and you still made the attempt on your life. And he and I laugh about that now. It is, like, yeah, you didn't do a great job, buddy. But now you understand why that matters. When the mind is in tunnel vision and the nervous system is in survival mode, one real human connection can interrupt the spiral. And it did. Now, I didn't respond to his message back then. Perhaps if I had responded, things would have went a little bit differently. I could have perhaps explained to him how I felt. And that's the thing with these things, is that it's very hard to ascertain the possible outcomes. But on the back end of it, I knew I had one person. There was one person that when I disconnected off of the grid, when I went silent, when for all intensive purposes disappeared from the world, there was one person thinking about me. And I'll play the video for you guys in a bit. But it impacted me greatly, and it made me understand that's the type of person that I want to be. I want to be that person who has the power of one. That if I can, no matter the outcome, I will reach out. I will touch lives. I will do my utmost so that someone could feel seen, heard, valued, and assist if I can in helping them find their reasons for wanting and needing to continue this life. So I want to give you guys some practical tools. That's why we call it the Kyle principle. It is something that is embedded into the very fabric of our company. It's in my direct memos for our department heads and each of the departments of our company. It is something that is woven into my interview process. And we call it the power of one, aka the Kyle principle, because of what happened that day. And it's a strategy for each and every single one of us to remember that our voice matters, that how we interact with other people matter, that when you think of someone, don't hesitate. Call them. Send that text message, send that video, send that GIF, something to let that individual person know that you care, that you're present, that their future holds weight in your eyes, that it's not just a passive scroll or a double tap on a screen liking a post, that you give a damn about the person behind the telephone. And so there are five rules that go along with the Kyle principle, and about 6 different ways of application for those. But it's number 1, notice when someone goes quiet. In your relationships day to day, are you connected enough to that person to even notice when they go quiet? That should be an indication to you about, number 1, how much you care and how present you are, how aware you are of the connections that you have in your life. Number 2, reach out even if it feels awkward. Sometimes I don't know what to say to people. So that's exactly what I say. I'm honest. Hey, I don't really know what to say, but just want you to know I care. I'm thinking about you. Hope you're doing well. Number 3, say it clearly. We've lost clear communication. There was a documentary that I watched a few years back, and it was about a closed study ran by a psychologist and his team, and it was a case study of about 1,000 men, and how in 10 years, those 1,000 men, they were in a few different control groups with, variables that were slightly different. I think one of the control groups was even in a placebo of how they were, running the experiment, and perhaps I'll put that link in the description. I'm going to have to find it. But talked about how little out of those 1,000 men remember the last time they heard someone tell them genuinely, I love you, I care about you. And this isn't about gender. It's not men in general, we don't communicate as well as women. Women are much better communicators than men in some cases. But the point being is they took 1,000 random human beings, and 1,000 random human beings, over 90% of them, realized that they don't remember the last time someone actually genuinely said, I care about you. And so if you were to do that in scale to the remainder of the planet, how many people, how many millions of people? So rule number 4, stay. Staying power is so important. If you're going to engage in a relationship with someone, and I understand people change, circumstances change, but the antithesis of friendship is walking away. True friendship is designed as this: individuals that have come together in agreement for the betterment of one another. Now, that doesn't mean it's without hard conversations. That doesn't mean it's without conflict. Actually, conflict is a blessing. On the other side of conflict is growth. But a true friendship is when 2 people agree that they are going to challenge one another for greatness, support one another when they fall. That's a true friend. So don't just send one text and then disappear. Stay. To relate in a ship, you're embarking on a journey with that person, if you're so inclined. If not, hey, I'm not saying that every single friendship, you're going to have is going to be deep and connected, because that's just not the truth. I mean, I can count on one hand the people that I know I can really rely on. My wife, number one, and Kyle certainly being the number two person. So I'm not saying this is going to happen in droves for you, but those select few people in your life that you know for sure if they were to commit suicide, any suicide is tragedy, but it would be an impactful tragedy on your life if that person were not here tomorrow. Stay. And number 5, take action. Call, leave a voice note, invite them, or show up. So, awkward is cheap. So when you're talking about life, awkward is a cheap price. Regret is very expensive. Another quote that I think of often, it says, most people live their lives in quiet desperation. And from my own personal experience, I can tell you, regret is way more expensive than awkward. So don't pay the latter price. Pay the cheap price, because that awkward may save someone's life. I'll give you some practical examples of what you may say. Obviously, if you have enough of a connection with that person, you'll know exactly what to say. And I believe that. I believe that life, the universal force of love, will lead you in the moment. You know, there's that intuitive part of the human psyche that when you're in connection with another human being, oftentimes you do know what to say, even when it's awkward. But here are some examples. Things that certainly would have impacted me. And so hopefully it will be useful to you. I would have loved to have heard, hey, you've been quiet. I care about you. Are you okay? I would have loved to hear, no pressure to reply fast, but I'm here. Are you safe right now? Can I call you for 2 minutes? Do you want company tonight? I'm not here to fix you. I just don't want you alone. Would you be open to calling 988 together? If you don't know what 988 is, that is the U.S. Suicide Hotline. There are international numbers as well. And, I list those numbers in the description of every single video I post, because at a certain point, sometimes you want professional help, obviously. But hopefully it doesn't have to get there, right? But here's some things for sure you don't want to say when someone is in that cognitive restriction and they really, really see no other way out than relief, ultimate relief. You definitely don't want to say these things. Number 1, just be grateful. Because you're immediately diminishing where they are and trying to guru them out of an actual mind state. And that doesn't work. Trying to correct someone who is on the edge doesn't work, because already inherently they feel a sense of guilt for even wanting to commit suicide. So to correct on top of that just solidifies that guilt. Yep, I knew I was wrong, which adds to the loop, I am the problem, which adds to the desire to relieve the world of that problem. Other people have it worse. I mean, I don't know what's more emotionally tone deaf than that. When someone is in front of you in the midst of suffering and they're perhaps express to you that they have suicidal ideation and you tell them someone else has it worse. I mean, that's just absolutely rancid and disgusting. But the thing is, I've heard stories, and sadly enough, I experienced these things on my own. Think positive. Well, if I could think positive, perhaps I wouldn't be considering being out of here, because that's about the only positive thing that I can think of right now. You're being dramatic. So, on top of their suffering, you're going to pose accusation. Great job. God wouldn't give you more than you could handle. Now, this one is very specific to a very specific subset of individuals. And the thing is, if that person truly were to believe that, they wouldn't be considering taking their own life. And oftentimes, especially for a person who grew up in religion or has some sort of notion of God in their life, they already feel as though God isn't helping them. And so, minimizing pain increases isolation. Now, you may not agree with that person's philosophy in life. You personally may not even agree that the suffering they're describing to you elicits a suicidal response. But regardless, that's where that person is. Now, there are ways to detect if they're saying it just for attention, because unfortunately, that is also something that is common in certain circumstances. But for the most part, you can tell. You can tell because suicide is that person's last option. If there's a person that continuously reaches the conclusion of suicide over and over and over and over again, and they tell you about it over and over and over and over and over again, most likely that person is being disingenuous. Because again, to reach the point of no return, it takes quite a lot. It took quite a lot for me to get there. So, don't diminish pain. Try to understand it. Even if you don't agree with it, try to understand it. I think that's one of the ways that we can heal the world. Is yes, truth must be grounded in reality, and what that person may be believing might not be real. And obviously, I don't believe that human beings have no options. I believe we definitely have options. I believe we can thrive and not just survive. I believe in hope. I believe in the grass being greener on the other side, because it really is. And that's a corny expression, but it truly is. It's just about perspective. And so, truly though, if someone tells you they're not safe, don't just text. Call, stay present as much as you can, and if necessary, get help involved. So, I'm going to play the video for you guys that Kyle sent. And he was being himself, very much so. And it did leave a lasting impact on my life. And I pray that I can be that voice for anyone who needs it. That's part of why I do this channel. That's part of why we do what we do. I never want anyone to be where I was ever again. And I know that I cannot achieve that outcome, but I will try. For the rest of my life, I will try. Any human being that I can touch and have a positive impact on, I want to do that. This has been Thomas Emmanuel Arms O'Brien. Truly, from the bottom of my heart, I love you guys.
What's up, you little bitch? Sending you some love, man. Hopefully everything is good, bro. Hopefully everything is good, or at least you're trying to make the best out of whatever situation it is, good or bad, man. But I just wanted to say I love you, thinking about you. Hopefully things are going good, bro. Stay sexy, baby.